I'm going to quickly give us a bit of a context set to take us into the session. So as I say, we want to bring local government together to discuss its role in transport decarbonisation, support sharing of knowledge and ideas and good practice. We've got particular focus on energy infrastructure challenges in the electrification of transport. And we want to fill gaps in what local authorities are doing and not duplicate anything here. We cover the northwest of England, which is well-defined geography, and I wanted to explain it. And we tend to work with the tier 1 authorities, but also all the district councils in those areas, trying to get to the climate officers and their other teams within those councils who are trying to work on projects. And our objective as a hub is to bring in the investment into those net zero opportunities. So public charging and depot funding will need investment. There's some grant, but that's not the whole story by any means. So how can we work out where other funding and finance is coming into play? And how do we also improve the quality of what we're doing? Our programme covers a lot of moving parts of the net zero sector. We've got a relatively large team in the northwest now. We cover industrial, home energy, heat networks, community and buildings. We don't explicitly cover transport, but we've been speaking to councils about what their needs are, and this area keeps coming up. I participate in a green fleet event, which takes place in the region from time to time, and I've heard directly from fleet managers about the challenges they're facing in delivering on policy objectives to decarbonise fleet. Well, the depot needs a redesign. It might even need to be moved. And the implications, the practical delivery implications, which is what we care about, need sounding out. So in that area and on Levi and perhaps in others, we want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So I just talk about a few things that are important from my perspective. I'll touch on transport policy, although we'll hear more from Fiona. I'll say what the wider role of local authorities is. I'll talk about energy networks, local area energy plans, some work that's gone on in the Midland developing transport hubs, how we support knowledge sharing, and just a bit about alternative fuels, but although electrification very much the focus. So there was a lot of new information in the budget on transport around how regulation and standards might drive decarbonisation of transport in vehicle space. Funding was announced for rail. Things are going on with bus. That's all very important and of interest, and maybe of interest to some of you. I think Fiona may give us a bit of a budget update as well as a bit of policy context, and you can tell us of things we haven't considered. So the first priority in that decarbonising transport space is around modal shift, cycling and walking. So very important. There's some funding out there for that. It's not an area close to our remit, but maybe of interest to some councils. Other areas of interest are on the environmental side, are air quality and waste collection and biofuels. We are interested in spatial planning, particularly planning approval, holding back investment, and a new kid on the block, if you like, which is energy system planning. Previously, that's all been done by the electricity networks. From around about now, the National Energy System Operator is looking to regions and local governments to inform that planning systemically through something called the Regional Energy Spatial Plan, and we're interested in that, and you may be too. Rail and bus services. I think we're talking today about fleet decarbonisation of the cars and vans that councils use with the AST. Bus depot decarbonisation, particularly in places where buses are being taken back into public ownership, as in Greater Manchester and Liverpool. That is an interesting topic. And another topic of interest potentially is how we work with taxi firms and support last mile trips through the likes of electric bikes. We're not talking so much about those today. On energy networks, I think the key issues are where we locate public charging points and how we plan for that, bringing the investment in and spending it on time before the funding is taken away. I believe 5 million of funding has come to the Northwest for Levi, but 50 million is allocated. I know from speaking to colleagues that if you want to electrify your fleet entirely around a depot, that's going to have grid implications because you need to stand up every vehicle and charge it in a spot rather than bring it through for fueling in a single place. We're very interested in public sector decarbonisation of the buildings stock. So there's lots of funding out there for that. But when we're trying to decarbonise the heat in those buildings, we really must be thinking about putting in the EV charging or planning for it, because the overall headroom, electrical capacity of that building is relevant. Quite a few buildings in the Northwest pay a lot of money for more capacity than they ever use. Do we give all that back to the DNO and get a saving on it, or do we think about the need for EV and heat decarbonisation future? That's something of a live issue, I think. So yeah, I've just heat decarbonisation, on-site generation, and EV charging are all linked together in terms of how they're managed in a building. And we care about the future scenarios and the long-term trend for the decarbonisation of transport in the Northwest, particularly in relation to how the grid is invested in time. Eddie's not able to join us on the call today, but we have a lead who's our expert in public buildings. If you're not already talking to him and you want to, please let us know and we'll put you in touch. The wave of PSD funding is currently live. I believe bids might be due in today. So the teams that are working on that are all very busy thinking about that, but there'll be more of that funding to come. And I'll say that the new government is talking about a local power plan and investing in generation in local government buildings. We don't know the details of that yet, but I think that's going to galvanise quite a lot of action next year. Local area energy planning, for those that aren't familiar with it, is a kind of geography-based future plan and future scenario for your area. It has to be based on good, firm data. And that includes transport data and a feel for how we're going to decarbonise our cities, particularly around charging infrastructure, I would suggest, but also modal shift potentially. The Midlands Hub has done some work which was asked for by local government in its area to develop the idea of transport hubs, multimodal transport hubs, where you can charge public vehicles, private vehicles, electric vehicles, possibly also alternative fuel vehicles. If you're going to create that sort of charging hub, you need to do that in a place where the grid supports it, or you find investment for that. And so they looked at some large-scale sites where they would redesign some of their charging infrastructure around kind of a broad set of needs. We've never been asked to do that in the Northwest, but I think it's an interesting area. Fiona's going to talk a little bit about the resources that are available from the Energy Saving Trust and the Department of Transport and Cenex in this space. From our point of view, funded by the Department of Energy, we like to promote the Net Zero Go platform. This is a platform for councils to find information about energy projects. There are transport reports on there. There is a national working group on transport decarbonisation across the hubs. So without asking people to look in too many places, I think it's worth having a conversation about where people are finding resources. I don't just mean advice on what people should be doing, but the procurement routes and the templates and the tender documents that we all generate ourselves sometimes. Just briefly before I finish, I think there's alternative fuels are an alternative option to electrification. We're in a part of the world in the Northwest where we may have some options here. There are hydrogen production facilities being developed in Cheshire around Ellesmere Port, linked to industrial decarbonisation. But there's also been a study in Liverpool on the need for green hydrogen for transport, marine industry, which looks again at this problem of where do you put that infrastructure where it's going to be most needed and taken up. And a recent report that was notified to me, quite out of scope of a onshore discussion, but we are talking about the first green shipping corridor between Liverpool and Belfast. Some research has been done on that recently, so it's an area of interest.